Hey there, fellow citizens of the internet. Welcome to the Moses Kabandana Podcast. Today I have Karl Pierre with me. He is someone that I ran into on YouTube, and he's creating great, amazing, and informative content in aviation, traveling, how to create businesses, and how to be a well-rounded individual above all things. So without any further ado, Pierre, welcome to the Moses Kabandana Podcast.
Oh, thanks for having me, and thanks for the colorful interview.
Awesome. So you've created a lot of content on traveling, and one of those was the $1 houses in Italy. And I had seen those, ads around like 2019 at the same time that you were about to create those videos. And I just remember like talking with my friends, just playing around with the idea of doing that. But, none of us actually pulled the trigger on that. So the question is, what was your first international trip, and where was it and why?
My first international trip was in my childhood. It was visiting Haiti with my father, but I was really young, don't really remember things that clearly. Then the next international trip that I took that I do remember clearly was going up to Quebec City, and into like the countryside of Quebec, and that's Canada. So it's familiar to the United States, but since Quebec is more of like a francophone or French influenced province within Canada, it has a different feel and slightly different culture than the United States or than Canada itself. But I would say then after that, my first trip internationally as like a young adult was to Cancun, Mexico, spring break early in my college career. And then obviously plenty of other trips thereafter.
How did that feel? Like going to Mexico where the culture was not, I'm assuming here, that it was not as similar as the one in the US, let alone the one in Canada.
Spring break? Yeah. Well, spring break in Mexico is pretty wild, especially in the early 2000s. It was a completely different era, but I would say pretty wild because the drinking age in Mexico is 18 years old, even if they even honor that, and in the United States it's 21. So a lot of American college students enjoyed going down to Mexico because they have different rules, different set of rules altogether around alcohol consumption, more so than the United States. And they just go down there and go absolutely wild. So it was like first time traveling without the parents, a bunch of young college guys partying, drinking. So different experience, but it's still very Americanized. I was going down to Cancun, Mexico, so it's all resorts, all in a kind of American fashion. A lot of American brands, so you don't really get that cultural immersion that you would in if you went to different parts of Mexico. But by comparison to the States, it's like Miami meets Mexico meets Las Vegas in a way. Best way I could describe Cancun.
Okay, that's amazing. I've traveled to many other places, but for some reason I've never gone to Mexico. Like I've gone to Canada and in South America, in Africa, and now in Europe, but I haven't made my way down to Mexico yet. Do you speak any Spanish?
Sí.
Oh,
Solo
nice. How did
puedo. Sí. I can speak a little bit of Spanish.
Amazing. And did you pick that up in school or like during your travels?
No, I started learning Spanish somewhat recently because I have a business in Medellin, Colombia. My wife is Venezuelan, and her first language is Spanish as well. So I started to need to learn the language. So I've just been picking it up and kind of learning using language apps to just be able to function within those countries. And my plan overall is to move to South America and to Spain. So I'm going to need to be proficient. One of my personal goals is to get to fluency, like being able to read and write at the high school level in Spanish.
Okay. Yep.
So I'm working on that.
Wow. And why Spanish? I mean, and you mentioned that that's the native language of your wife, and you want to have more homes in South America. But would that be like the main reason? And then like, are there like some sub reasons for wanting to learn Spanish specifically?
Yeah, because I think Spanish is a useful language. I think there's like 500 million native Spanish speakers in the world. So it's within the top 10 languages as far as most spoken. So you have English that's widely spoken, Mandarin, Hindi, Arabic, Spanish, Portuguese. I believe Russian is pretty widely spoken, but that's obviously in Russia and Soviet Union. So there's certain languages that by default are just spoken by more people in the world, and Spanish is one of them. If you look at the Americas, most of the people in the Americas speak Spanish. There's like if you pile up all the South American countries, all the Central American countries, all the Spanish speakers in the United States. To me, on this side of the planet, it's a necessity. And then if you go into kind of like the Eastern Hemisphere or like Western Europe, it's going to be useful in Spain, and then it's going to be useful in any of the Spanish colonies kind of towards the east. So for me, it's a matter of how likely am I to have to use this language for business or use this language while I'm traveling, and it just makes sense to me.
And speaking of things that make sense in relation to international travel, like what do you think is the biggest misconception that Americans have when it comes to traveling abroad?
Safety. I would say it's probably the top thing. I think Americans have this idea that every place that isn't Western Europe and that isn't America, Australia, Canada, New Zealand is dangerous and wildly dangerous. Like go outside and you're going to get kidnapped, your organs stolen, shot at, those sort of things. Like that's the general conception that I think most Americans have of the world outside of what I mentioned. So when you actually start to travel into like countries that aren't as visited by Americans or aren't as promoted in our history, you find that all those things, or that general sense of a lack of safety in the rest of the world isn't accurate, right? There's going to be some safety issues in any major city in the world for the most part, right? Just because high density creates disparity in wealth, which creates the propensity for crime. So once you can just understand that the same rules that would apply in a big city in the United States will apply in a big city in all other parts of the world, once you wrap your mind around that, you know how to move. And then when you start going into the countryside of other countries, people generally just get more trusting, nicer, there's more safety. So I think that's, if I were to say that there's any misconception, it's a safety misconception, and that can easily be disproved by just taking yourself to that place.
That is very, very true. I was in Uganda last year, in like about 30 minutes from the border of Congo. And during the time that we were like booking the Airbnb, my girlfriend and I booking the Airbnb and thinking, man, we really never been to this place. We don't really understand much of the language. Well, they do speak plenty of English around, but we're not quite familiar with this geographical area. We're a little bit uneasy about the safety side of these things. But we were there in this particular region for 2 weeks, and man, we were just fine. Just fine.
Where's your girlfriend from?
She's Italian. She's from Italy.
Okay.
Yep. So yeah, the safety side, we had this preconceived ideas that because we've never been there and we don't know what the political climate is, and that's a legitimate concern there. But we just had the most amazing time. Have you ever experienced racism while traveling?
Actually, no. Like to me, racism is a funny thing. I don't go around looking for it and trying to kind of detect, am I being the victim of racism here? Because I think about racism very much from the kind of American tradition.
Okay.
in America, racism was legal. So we learn about that in our history, and you see that at one point in time, blacks were owned. At one point in time, blacks didn't have the right to vote. At one point in time, we couldn't ride the same bus. At one point in time, we couldn't eat in the same restaurants. So you're kind of racist right in your face and kind of brought to your attention all the time. But even in America, I don't really get like direct, I'm not like the direct victim of racism, right? In the same way that blacks were maybe in the 1930s or the 1940s, where people were lynched, people were attacked on the street. I've never been attacked anywhere for being a black person. Like that's not my reality. But in the United States, there's still like this subtle racism that's built into our culture that I can detect because I'm American and I know how it functions. But in other countries that don't have such a well-defined racial structure, racism kind of fades quickly, right? And if I don't know the nuances of the culture, I can't be able to say, oh, this person's being racist towards me. For me to feel like the victim of racism, I have to be detained, attacked, feel threatened, and I generally don't feel that way. I think when I'm traveling in countries that there isn't a large black population, I think I'm going to get more attention just because I'm visibly a foreigner, right? And that if I was I was a dwarf, I would get a lot of attention too. If I was 7 feet tall, I would get a lot of attention anywhere just because I am different than the local. So I don't view that as racism. I view it as people just being curious in what makes me different. And if it's my skin color in a certain area, then okay, whatever. Like I was in Thailand and people would refer to me as Chocolate Man or Obama. Now I know Americans would get kind of triggered by that. Like, what do you mean? You know, but I didn't take offense to it because the people aren't saying it to me in a mean way. And it's like based on tone, based on how I'm being embraced, there's no negativity there. It's just they don't even know that might be a sensitive point for someone who's my color to be called Chocolate Man or to be kind of compared to Obama. And if anything, it shows me that they're like most people respect the president of the United States, and that would more be like a kind of like a term of endearment, or like, hey, I know that you're American and I know that you might value this president, and it may be awkward if that happened in the United States, but being in a foreign place, I view it totally differently. So those are the sort of things that may happen. But like as a black dude in Thailand, you're kind of a rarity because they're like people from the African continent aren't traveling to Thailand in large numbers, and the blacks from America aren't traveling to Thailand in large numbers. Most of the time, actually, when I'm traveling like in the East, most people automatically assume that I am from the UK or France, because the only time that they see black people in their parts of the world, they're from the UK or France, because it's not American blacks that are going 20 hours by plane somewhere. So once they learn that I'm American, then it's kind of like their minds are blown, and then they just become curious about what part are you from? New York? Are you from these places that they've seen on television? Not having anything to really do with my race.
What do you think the barrier is then? I don't want to like linger too much on this, but what do you think the barrier is for African Americans to travel outside? Is it that same reason that you mentioned of security, or is there something more than just that?
Oh, deep insecurity and fear of rejection is probably number one. Number two might be socioeconomics, but they're carrying the typical American fear. Then they're carrying the fear of how am I going to be treated as a black person, because I already feel like second class in the United States. Imagine how someone in another country is going to perceive me.
Okay. Yeah.
those two things are enough to say, I'm good. I don't want to have that negative experience. For me, if somebody dislikes me because of this color of my skin, that person's a moron, and I don't need to really interact with them. Like that's it's such a non-event. I encourage people from the United States, especially Black people, to go out and meet and interact and unlearn the BS that we learned in the United States.
Absolutely. When you're talking about that chocolate man and Obama experience, it reminded me of my girlfriend and I when we were in Uganda. We're walking in this neighborhood, super tiny, no lights, and it's almost dusk, right? And this kid, like, he comes out and he sees my girlfriend, and he starts yelling, "Wazungu, Wazungu." No, Wazungu is Swahili for white people, plural, right? Wazungu, Wazungu. And then his older brother, or like another older kid, comes out and then he looks around and he smacks him. He's like, no, that's just one white person. And then the kid stops. He looks again, Muzungu, Muzungu. So he readjusts to one white person, like white person. So it's like that kind of like subtle things that could be taken as, racist, but at the heart of it, there's no racism in that. It's just a genuine curiosity of someone that just really stands out like a sore thumb. And another note that I want to add to emphasize the point that you made is that one time last year I was in Lisbon, and I ran into a brother from California, and we hung out, we kicked it pretty well, and towards the end, as we were parting ways, he looks at me and says, "Hey man, remember, you're a Black man," right? And I walked away, and I'm thinking, this guy is walking around, he's exploring other cultures, obviously, so he's doing something already that's plausible and amazing, but he's carrying this, I am a Black man, everywhere that he goes, right? Instead of saying that I am a man that happens to be Black, right? And that's the kind of philosophy that I'm carrying, is that, hey, I'm a man, I just happen to be Black, but just that little switch there of I'm a Black man just changes a lot of how you go about navigating the different cultures. So that just kind of like emphasizes the points that you already made. So just kind of like move off this topic for a minute. What are some tips and tricks that you have or that you've gathered over time in your travel? So let's say for someone that just like they finished high school or finished college, or they just don't have a lot of money. Like, do you have tips of like how to penny pinch, so to speak, as you're traveling?
I think I don't really have any tips. Because my tips aren't going to be around the financial aspect of it, right? Because I've never looked at it from that perspective, like, oh, how to travel cheap, for example. That's not my area of expertise or anything. Yeah. But if I was going to talk to somebody who's looking to start their travel experience, I would tell them to try to learn the language before you go somewhere, and be willing to meet the people, right? Because if you travel as a couple, you find security in the person that you're with, or you travel as a group of friends, you kind of stay within your little bubble of friends. But if you can travel alone and force yourself to meet people, interact with new people, and especially if you're going to a place that there's a different language, try to learn something about the language and put yourself in situations where you have to interact with the people, because that's where you're going to get the richest experience. Yeah, that would be my number one advice, is because like your experience is going to be so much better if you could talk a little bit, right? You're going to meet new people, you're going to make friends, you're going to be able to maybe joke around a bit, find your way around, not feel so alone. And then if you are alone, it kind of forces you to like want to interact with people, to want to make friends, to have someone that can show you around. I think that's where you get the best out of your travels, is when you start to connect with other people that are from a completely different world than you. Yeah.
The only thing that I would add to that, from my experience at least, is if not language, then either add music or food. Like, I found that when you know someone's cultural foods, they bond with you right away. Like, you may not know everything about their culture, but if you mention a particular food that's very well known for that culture, they're all over. You've opened a room there for some connection, and music is also another one. People, they just, if you can connect with the music, if you can share the culture music, it's something that kind of doesn't transcend cultures, but it makes that mingling a little bit easier. Do you have a bucket list for countries that you would like to?
I've got a life bucket list, and on that bucket list is to visit every country in the world.
Wow, it's amazing. Ooh, within a particular time frame?
Before death. That's pretty much it. Yeah. Before death, whichever happens first, I get to see the whole world, or meet an untimely demise. Yeah. But yeah, I would like to do it younger than older, just so I could physically experience more. So I'm trying to get through that list.
Okay, and that does just kind of like sum up with this whole traveling part of the podcast. Would you live outside of the States for like medium to long term? Let's just say minimum a year. Where and why you would do that?
That question broke up on me.
Would you live medium to long term? Would you live outside of the United States? If so, where would you live and why?
Yeah, I absolutely plan on living outside the United States for the rest of my life. The only thing that I'm waiting on is for my wife's citizenship to be approved. And we're about, I would say, 6 months away from that. But the next place on my list to live is Colombia. I'm going to be living there for about 3 to 5 years, just to continue to build out my business and get a couple things that I want to get accomplished down there. And then after that, I'm going to be living in Spain, and I'll probably live in Spain up until my kids graduate from high school. And after that, that's like 15 years away. So after that, I don't know where I will call home. But Colombia's on my list. Spain's on my list. I'm building a house in Brazil right now. I love Brazil. It's a great country. I think it's just inconvenient for my business and for my family to be down there. It's just Rio de Janeiro is kind of out of the way. It's kind of difficult to explain, but it's out of the way from my current life. So it's kind of difficult to be able to manage my businesses and be able to get in and out of the United States easily. Rio de Janeiro's at minimum 8 hours from just Rio to Miami. Yeah. So, but those places are on my list. And the reason why I want to live outside of the United States is that I have 2 daughters. And fortunately, I haven't let kind of the stigma of race hold me back from making progress. Because like the example that you gave before, the guy who said, well, don't forget you're a black dude. That has limited him in so many ways by branding himself in the language of the oppressor, right? Right. So he's going to take himself out of certain situations. He's going to disqualify himself. It's going to affect his behavior and his decisions in a lot of ways. I don't want my kids growing up in a country where they're going to be socialized in that way. And that's the main reason why I want to live outside the United States. Secondary to that is that I feel like the quality of life, the values of like family values and lifestyle values outside the United States are just better. Cost of living in most places, you get better quality of life, better access to things for far less money. I feel like the United States is great for making money. It works really well from like the bureaucracy isn't that bad. The corruption isn't that bad. It's kind of a structured corruption. So things work well in the States, but the impact that the culture is going to have on my kids, I don't want that.
Okay. You mentioned Brazil and Spain. Where in Brazil do you wanna live?
Rio de Janeiro.
Rio de Janeiro. Okay. I only spent a week there, so I don't know much. But when I was there, it was good vibes, really, really good vibes. The culture, I think at the time, the Brazilian population was 51% mixed with African descent, right? So as far as culture and just being a very, very melting pot, so to speak, it's on a whole different level. Great place. And where in Spain?
Valencia.
I don't know anything about Valencia. But yeah, I've never thought about like living outside of the States full time. Although the entire 2020 year, I was in the States for maybe 2 months, maybe 3 months total. So I guess I'm like already like slowly moving out in a way. But all my folks are pretty much back there, so I gotta go back to the States, to hang out and forge the relationships that I've built over time and kind of continue to nurture those. But it's been a huge learning experience just stepping outside of the States, 3 months at a time, 6 months at a time. It's just amazing. I mean, and it's not just, I'm not like kicking down on the States, so to speak. Just like if you're from Brazil, if you're from Hong Kong, whatever it is that you're from, I feel like at some point you should step out of that for a healthy amount of time, just to see how life is done in other corners of the world. I feel like that's pretty something that is very, very crucial to do. Okay, so I'm gonna switch to aviation because it's something that I just like. I'm super green in it, and that's how I ran into your content. And I think you had bought a plane for $35K, I believe. Or you made a video that was like a video on the fact that like aviation to buy a plane is not like this absurd idea, and that resonated with me so bad because like. The only thing that I knew about buying planes was you got to be a millionaire. You got to be a millionaire. There's no way that a regular schmuck can just buy a plane. And then I started looking into the financials of it. It's like, wait a minute, a brand new 2022 Honda Accord is gonna run you 40, 45, 50, even 60 with some options. And then when you look at some of these reused planes, 35, 45K, 55K, I was like, this is interesting. I never knew anything about this. So what got you into aviation?
It was a professor of mine. As far as general aviation is concerned, I think most people when they see an airplane, they're fascinated by it. Right? If you look at kids, they're like, "What this machine is flying." People are fascinated by flight, and I think that's just been something that humans have always been intrigued by. But I had a professor who was a pilot or is a pilot and who owned a plane. And then I found that fascinating because I was like, here's a teacher of mine that I respect. And he flies from upstate New York to Long Island to do his job and flies back. And I was like, how cool is that? And I was like, that would be pretty dope to be able to, in my adult life, do the same thing. And I ended up taking a flight lesson. And most people's journey in aviation starts that way. They take a discovery flight, they take a flight lesson or something along those lines. And then at that point, you determine, do you have the grit for it or not? And I was like, you know what, this is something I'm going to do. 10 years passed. I did my discovery flight in 2007, right when I had graduated from college. And I got a reminder on Facebook, 10 years ago this occurred. And I was actually sitting in Colombia when I got that reminder, and I was like, wait a second, it's been 10 freaking years, and I still haven't got my pilot's license. And I remember my professor telling me, if you're going to get your pilot's license, get a group of friends together, 3 or 4 friends, buy an entry-level aircraft. And he was like, you could get one for the price of a Honda Accord. And I was like, really? And I had no idea that the entry point could be that low. And he was like, and then you have 4 people to share the cost with. You're going to be able to build your time. You're not going to be dependent on renting airplanes from the flight school, and then he's like, it's going to cost you about $12,000 to $15,000 to get your license anyway. So why not take that $12,000 to $15,000, put it towards a plane, and now you own that plane, right? And he's like, and then you're just going to be paying for flight instruction. So I was like, yeah, that's a good idea. I couldn't convince any of my friends to go in with me, so I ended up registering for a flight school. And that idea of buying my own plane stayed with me. And fortunately, I was in a position to do so. But I completed my first 40 hours of flight training, and I had paid for that in advance. And it was like about $12,000 or $10,000 that got me to that point. And I was like, you know what? I still need more time to finish. Let me just buy my plane now, and I'll do the rest of my training in my plane. But my flight school wouldn't train me in my plane, because obviously part of their business is to make money on the plane rental. So I got my plane. I still trained independently, because at some point in your flight training, you're cleared to fly solo. So once I was cleared to fly solo, I would do a lot of my practice in my plane, and then I would kind of check out with my instructor in the flight school plane. And that allowed me to practice more at the cost of renting my airplane rather than at the cost of renting. But overall, I would say being a pilot is freaking cool, because there's only a small percentage of people in the world that can say that. And you really understand, you get a better understanding of the weather. You get a better understanding of what is exactly going on whenever you're at an airport, whenever you're in a plane. You understand turbulence better. You understand the weather better. You understand just what's happening. And it can take a lot of the anxiety out of flying, especially for people who do get nervous about flying. Yeah. So I don't know. It's definitely been a bonus in my life.
Wow, that makes me like super excited, because I did my discovery flight last week. I flew into the States for a wedding in Wisconsin, and like I was like, well, I'm gonna be there for a week anyways. Let me schedule a discovery flight. I went to Madison Aviation, and cool instructor hooked me up, and went out for a discovery flight. And like the minute that those wheels left the ground, I was like, I'm gonna die, right? But like, dude, like 20 minutes in, I was like, this is amazing. This is just the fact that I can do this. I can really do this. It's amazing. And I had been spending the last month since April 1st. I've been doing ground school on my own. I purchased an online school, and I've just been going at it. But right after that discovery flight, I just started calling flight instructors in Michigan, because my folks are in Michigan, and I'm most likely going to do the training in Michigan, and just really starting to want to make it happen. And I'm hoping that in the next 3-4 weeks I can study fully, and the first thing that I do when I come back to the States is to take that knowledge test, because I want to get that out of the way, and then I can get in the cockpit with an instructor and just knock that out. So you telling me this just makes me like even way more excited than I already am. So speaking of excitement, what doors would you say that aviation has opened that weren't there before, if any?
I wouldn't say that necessarily open doors. I think what the interesting thing is that pilots and aircraft owners are a rare kind of breed of people. So they're more willing to take risk. They tend to be a little more kind of STEM focused, right? Or attracted to the STEM fields. So a lot of pilots in general are high net worth business owners or high level professionals. So, and you just have this one thing in common, which is this love for aviation. So from a networking standpoint, you might meet other interesting people that could help advance your business or career, because they're usually further along. It's kind of an expensive hobby. And it, like I said, it kind of lends itself to people who are more into the STEM fields. But I can't really say that it's opened any kind of significant doors for me. I think like I've made some friends in aviation that if I wasn't a pilot, I would have never interacted with. But I would say, like, I think it all depends on what your use case is. And that's something that they're going to always tell you when you're getting your pilot's license or when you're buying your own plane. Is like, what is your ideal mission and why are you doing this? Are you going to career? route, and this is something that you're going to do to make money? Is this for leisure? Is this for business? What are you actually doing with your pilot's license or with your aircraft? But as far as like truly opening any doors for me, it hasn't yet. Like I said, I've met interesting people. I've collaborated with those interesting people.
Yeah.
But I couldn't say that those things might have not happened for me if I didn't have an airplane. I can't specifically say this thing occurred to me because I'm a pilot.
Oh, I lost you there. Poor connection on my end, perhaps. I'm in the middle of the woods. I live in an RV, by the way. My girl and I are like traveling all over Europe in an RV. So if the connection is dropping, it's probably on my end. But so yeah, thanks for bearing with that. But yeah, when I entered aviation, it was just something that I've wanted to do for a really, really long time. I was in Mozambique as a little kid, and I remember like one time, I looked up in the sky, and then I saw a plane going by, and I was like, this is just, first of all, let me move out the way because I think the feces are gonna fall on me. But like as I got in the States, and then I grew up, and I started to understand aviation a little bit, and when the financials start to make even more sense, I was like, I have to do it. And once I started to see that there's been other people that are much, much older than I, that they've wanted the same things when they were around my age, but they just never took that step for one reason or another, right? But also there's like a multitude of videos on YouTube of people that are like, hey, I started aviation at 45. I started aviation at 55. I'm starting aviation at 60, right? So with that in mind, would you say that aviation is something that is reserved for the rich then? Because it can be an expensive hobby, so to speak. But if you're not the high net worth type, can you get into an aviation and can you thrive in it by your own definition of thriving?
Yeah, it all depends. I think to get your pilot's license is going to run you about 15,000 average, 15 to 20, right?
Yeah.
And depending on your profession, that could be a lot of money or not a lot of money, right? To do that. Now, over how much time, right? Each lesson is going to run you about $400 average. And if you're doing one lesson a week, depending on how much you make, if you're making $400 a week, that's going to be, that's not going to work for you. Right. So, did you finance your education? There's so many ways to kind of think about that. But I do think that you have to have enough money to afford it. And if it is just for leisure flying, you got to expect that an aircraft is going to run you about at minimum $150 an hour to use.
Yep. Yeah.
Right. So, and that's like a smaller kind of aircraft, like a Cessna 150 or something like that. You might be able to get for $150 wet with fuel. So you have to think about that and say, all right, well, how many hours am I really going to be flying? Am I going to be flying once a week, once every other week? If it's once every other week for 2 hours, it's $150 a week kind of hobby, right? Some people blow that at the bar every weekend. So you can kind of rationalize how you're going to put this thing into your life as a hobby. When it comes to aircraft ownership, it can be expensive. And it's just because even though you could buy an airplane for $35,000, $40,000, everything is still priced at the starting price of that aircraft, right? So if I have a Piper Cherokee, so if you had a Piper Archer or whatever they're calling them today, brand new, you're looking at like $300,000 to $600,000 depending on engine size and configuration. So the parts for that thing are still, even though my plane is older, the replacement parts are still priced in proportion to that $300,000 to $600,000 price tag. So right now I have 4 gas tanks on my plane, and I have a leak on one of my tip tanks. That leak to replace the tip tank, right? We found one for $4,000 for a freaking fiberglass tank, right? This thing shouldn't cost more than $300 in my opinion. It shouldn't cost more than a bumper cover. But it cost $4,000. The one that shipped also had a leak. So then, all right, we can't use that part. Brand new, it cost $25,000. I'm not paying $25,000 for a tip tank when I bought the plane for $35,000, right? So I'm not doing that. Right. Then we found a repair shop that said that they'll do it for $8,000. And I'm like, I'm not paying $8,000 to fix this leak, right? I'd rather just not use my tip tanks. All right, I have 4 gas tanks. I could fly around for about 3.5, 4 hours on my main tanks. So F it. I'm not replacing. I'm not fixing this.
Right.
So the expense of ownership could catch up to you really quick. And if you buy a brand new plane, the brand new plane is going to have its brand new price tag. You're looking at putting 20% down. Like again, if you're buying a entry-level general aviation aircraft, that's $300,000 to about $1 million. Down payment's going to be $60,000 to $200,000, and then you're going to be carrying almost like a mortgage note. So
right.
When you go into ownership, you have to be higher. Like you have to have more money, right? You have to have disposable cash to afford ownership. But then there's ways to go about that. You could get into a flight club. You could share ownership with a few other people. You could go the experimental route. You could build. There's some like the Sonics aircrafts, for example. They're inexpensive experimentals. You could build one of those for about $40,000, $45,000. And the thing is, if you build it yourself, right? The experimental class is cheaper to maintain, right? Because if you built it yourself, you could repair it yourself. You don't have to be an aviation mechanic. So that $150 an hour charge that you get from an aviation mechanic doesn't apply because you've built a plane. You know everything that you need to do to repair your plane too. So if you were saying, hey, how could I get my own plane with a long life cycle for as affordable as possible, I would build my own experimental. Right? It's a different kind of project, different kind of maniac that you need to be, but you can totally do it. So that and that thing gets like they cruise at like 130 miles an hour and on like 3 or 4 gallons of gas per an hour. So it's very economical, very efficient. That would probably be the way that I would go if I was trying to be economical about aircraft ownership. Outside of that, it's money, man. It's going to cost you.
Okay. I actually need to write that down.
Like I'm actually going to sell my plane because last year I flew like 10 hours. This year I'm at like maybe 10 hours so far for the year. But my annual maintenance is on average about $10K a year, just between tie down, annual, little squawks that come up, little repairs that come up. So it's like, well, I'm paying an average of $1,000 an hour to fly. That doesn't make any sense. I could just rent.
Yeah.
Because I'm not flying as much as I would like to. I had a couple of kids. Can't fly with the pregnant wife. Can't fly with kids crying in the background. Like I'm just not using it as much as I would like to. So I'm going to sell it, and then I'll rent and rent and rent until I'm ready to buy again.
Okay. I'm gonna check out that experimental side of things because I was SONEX. SONEX. Okay, perfect. Because as soon as my dad found out that I'm looking into aviation, he's been sending me links to airplanes. So he's like more excited than I am. So this is amazing. It's amazing. The last thing that I wanna touch on, which I run out of I reached the limitations of my understanding in the field of entrepreneurship, given that I've never taken that step for myself to fruition, right? By my own definition of fruition. So creating a business, being successful in a business environment, cross-culturally, starting businesses in other cultures and expanding, man, what got into your mind? Like, how does one wake up one day and be like, I'm gonna start a business, and not only am I going to start a business, I'm going to employ people in different cultures, in different countries, and dealing with that. How did that even come to be? Like, what got you to this path of entrepreneurship?
Entrepreneurship is quite simple. The why for me is that I want control of my own time, and I want control of my earning potential. And that's something that I think has been with me my entire life since I was a kid. I used to work even as a 7-year-old packing groceries at the market. So I liked the ability to do something that gives me money so that I could do whatever I want. If that was having enough money to play video games at the arcade or buy my own video games instead of depending on my parents, that's what I worked for. So entrepreneurship leads very well to someone who's like that as a person. And for me, entrepreneurship is more about solving problems as they arise. And it's never like, oh, I'm going to build out this international business. It kind of happens based on what sort of problems you're trying to solve and what new problems are introduced to your life, right? It's more of a problem solving than it is anything else. The perks of entrepreneurship is that you're kind of in control of your earning potential. Your efforts are paid out to you. Hopefully, if you have a winning business, your efforts kind of equal your pay, right? So I find it just fits better for my personality. But if you're looking at potentially becoming an entrepreneur, it's not as sexy as the success makes it seem, right? Especially when you're looking at, like, entrepreneurship has been kind of glamorized maybe in the past 20 or 30 years, right? Mainly because of the internet and a lot of kind of internet successes. But entrepreneurship is lonely. Entrepreneurship is difficult. Early on, most of the time you're losing money. Most of the business ideas fail. So, like, it's not for the meek. You have to be someone who's willing to work more than 40 hours a week. You have to be someone who's willing to be the janitor, the psychologist, the engineer, the CEO, the accountant. You got to be willing to wear every damn hat that a company has. Yeah. And you have to do that with everybody kind of expecting you to fail. Right? Jeez. All the people closest to you not really thinking that this is going to pan out. And very early on, like, it's very rare that a company gets founded and knocks it out the park from day one. It's multiple pivots, it's multiple redirects, it's multiple failures. So that's always the part of the story that's missing. Right? You don't hear about the failed entrepreneur. You only hear about the successful ones. Right? All the guys who quit and went back to work, they never make the news. Right? That doesn't happen. Yeah. Right? You get celebrated when you're a success, and you definitely get coverage if you were a success and blew up. But up until that point, you're in the shadows. And that's the thing that a lot of, these entrepreneurial networks don't really talk about. They don't really show the trenches. They don't really show what's being put into the hot dog. And that's what it is. It's a lot of work, a lot of failure, a lot of self-doubt, a lot of adjustments. So if you're looking to kind of go on the entrepreneurial path, here's my advice. Entrepreneurship 100% is identifying a problem that multiple people are experiencing or multiple companies are experiencing, solving for that problem, making people aware that you have the solution to that problem, and doing a good job to service your customers. That's all it is. Okay? What people do is completely something opposite of that when they get into entrepreneurship. They focus on looking like a business. Looking like a business doesn't land you business.
Right.
Okay, you can look like a business. And what I mean by that is they worry about the website, the promotional materials, the car, the look, the whatever they associate with the successful. They try to kind of build out their offices to look like Google headquarters. None of that crap matters. What matters is that you have identified a true problem that a target market is having. You've solved that problem. You made the target market aware. And then when they decide to purchase your solution or your service, you do a good job. If you do that consistently and your target market is large enough, you will win. And if you listen to your customer and you constantly keep trying to solve their problems, they will constantly keep re-engaging and purchasing more from you. That's it. So whatever business you're getting into, I don't care how beautiful your product is. I don't care how pretty your office is, how beautiful your business card is. It's all crap. Are you truly solving someone's problem? And if you are, you're going to be all right. I like businesses that are kind of necessary. I like two kinds of businesses. I like businesses that service other businesses, and I like businesses that address real human needs. Right? So what are real human needs? Shelter, food, healthcare, energy, transport. Those are the businesses that I would always be interested in because humans need all of those things. Okay?
Yeah.
If you're satisfying a human need, you're always going to have a customer. If you're selling food, you're always going to have how well you do in the restaurant business depends on you. But if you're raising cattle, then you could service the general public, you could service restaurants, you could service the military, right? Because everybody needs food. You're selling healthcare. Most people are looking to survive and live. So, you should be in that line of work. For me, it's the number 1 and 2 things have been healthcare and real estate. And I stick by that. I'm looking to get into animal protein farming. Again, another human need. Yeah. And I like working with businesses because they're the best customers to have. Because if you're providing a product or service to a business that is necessary for that business to thrive, as long as they're thriving, they're going to be using you. Just like the internet, just like electricity, right? These are, if you're a food vendor, you're going to be selling to restaurants. They need food to run their business. I like businesses like that. I have a software company that services the healthcare industry. It's a tool that business is dependent on to manage their business. Right. So as long as they're in business and as long as they're thriving, they are a customer of mine. So those are the sort of things that I tend to look out for. And if you're going to start a business, the best advice is start first with identifying those problems. Really talk to the customer. Don't think, oh man, this would be great because I like it. This is a genius idea. It's great to me, without talking to who your potential market is. Because you're going to find very quickly that the real problems within a particular market are going to be different than what you believed as the entrepreneur, right? Or if you truly solve a problem that is in your life or in your industry, and you say, hey, I think this is a problem that not only I am having, then you need to go out and confirm that with the public. Say, is this really a problem that people are having? And is this a problem that people are willing to pay to fix? Or is this just a vanity thing that I'm trying to build that I like, and I think I'm cool, and I think I'm smart, and I think people will like it too. And you'll realize quickly that most people don't care.
Wow, you have given me a lot. You hit pretty much every point that I had a question for in that spiel there. Wow, I don't even have any more questions on regarding businesses. like I said, this is the realm at which is like well beyond my current competency. I never started a business. Well, I did a long time ago for like a super short. I tried to start a drone photography for real estate specifically. And this was like 2017, right like before that drone business was like super huge. But it was hard, cold calling but it was a good solution because real estate, especially like commercial real estate, in order for them to get like a full shot of their property, they need to hire a plane. So providing that solution for them, it was just amazing. So, but I've yet to take that step now, right, to identify a particular problem. I'm playing around with the idea of trying to teach people how to do this with minimal effort, right? So you have a smartphone. We all have a smartphone, and we have ideas that we feel like other people would benefit from. But the entry, there seems to be a barrier of entry towards people creating high quality content and sharing those with the world. But I'm doing it with just a smartphone, and that's pretty much all you need. And I want to be able to create, assuming that is the solution to the problem of, hey, I want to share my experience, but I don't know how to enter this. This would be a great solution. So I'm thinking on entering this entrepreneurial spirit. But hey, I really want to say thank you so much for having come onto the Moses Kabandana podcast. I feel like I learned a lot. I mean, I'm already traveling the world, and I'm already trying new things and experiencing how the world lives, how lives are done in other parts of the world, and you've done that. And I've learned a little bit about real estate, somewhat, not really. It's not something that I've gotten into, that I even plan on actually, taking an action on. But even knowing that is a possibility, you purchase a home in Italy, and like that's just knowing that is possible, right? Knowing that you can create businesses in other places in the world, and actually having a conversation with someone that has done so, it's tremendous. And in aviation, it's an expensive hobby. I thought that I was going to be able to just get in it and learn how to fly and get out, but I started learning about, hey, you need to, if you haven't flown in 2 years, you gotta be current. So now I'm like, oh man, I might have to and if I buy a plane, and that's gonna get expensive. So that's helping me it's going to help me restructure my finances moving forward, with regards to continuing aviation here. So thank you so much for coming on to the Moses Kabandana podcast. Is there anything that you would like to add as we come to a close here?
Well, I think for anybody who is curious about international living and methods on how to afford it, and just generally on entrepreneurship, I certainly encourage you to follow me at ENTPLIFE on YouTube. I also go by ENTP_life on Instagram. And that's what I cover: living globally and how to afford it. Whether it's hacks on how to purchase real estate, develop real estate, actually go through the process of moving to a new place, how to afford it, what can you do to generate income, what can you do to build a business, what can you do to invest your way to financial independence. That's what I cover, and that's what I really want to kind of share with the world, because most people have this desire to pick up and go somewhere else just to discover more about themselves and more about the world. But their immediate thought is, how am I going to afford it? What are my folks going to think? They go through this cycle of talking themselves out of it, and I'm trying to provide all of the answers to those doubts and show through my own experiences that it's also possible for others. So if that's you, then I highly encourage you to follow me and see where it takes you.
Thank you so much, Karl. I appreciate you coming to my podcast.
Thank you, man.
All right, everybody.